Hey everyone, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com. With WrestleMania 34 upon us, I figured I would do a video with my list of the top 34 matches in WrestleMania history. I came up with this list based on match quality and also historical impact that these matches had on the wrestling business, the characters, the storylines, all that put together to make this video and this list. Keep in mind, this is my opinion. I'm sure some of you will agree, some of you will disagree, but nonetheless, I came up with this list, 34 matches. Here we go. First match from 1987, and I should note that I'm going in chronological order here. WrestleMania 3, 1987, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. This match was the first of its kind, really, in the modern era of WWE. It was the first WrestleMania match where it was back and forth and you had a lot of near falls in the match. It was really exciting to watch at the time, and it's one of those matches that holds up with today's standards. Back then, it was more about the slower paced wrestlers, the bigger wrestlers, and these guys were doing more high-flying moves. It was faster paced. It was a very exciting match to watch. Excellent storyline leading up to the match, of course. The big moment with Ricky Steamboat having his larynx crushed or whatever from the ring bell attack courtesy of Macho Man Randy Savage. You had George Steele out there to complete that whole storyline. Randy Savage and George Steele had feuded over the previous year. Elizabeth was involved. All these different elements were put together into this match. Great storytelling, great match. Commentary was excellent. Definitely the first true WrestleMania classic as far as I'm concerned. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, also from WrestleMania 3. Technically, not a good match. I'm not even going to try and defend this as what it is in terms of the technical aspect of it. However, historically, this is as important as any WrestleMania match. Steamboat and Savage may have stole the show, but Hogan and Andre was the match that drew the people there and announced 93,000 people to WrestleMania, the first stadium WrestleMania. Hogan and Andre was the big draw, and it was the storyline that everybody was talking about. Andre the Giant, undefeated for 15 years. Kayfabe or not, that's what people believed, and people doubted Hogan's ability to slay the Giant. It was a very compelling match at the time. Andre had turned his back on Hogan, went with the evil Bobby the Brain Heenan. The storyline was what made this match, and the characters. The irresistible force meeting the immovable object, as the great Gorilla Monsoon would say. Very entertaining match, and one of the most iconic moments of all time in wrestling, Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant in the Pontiac Silverdome, 93,000 strong. Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage from WrestleMania 5. This was the culmination of a year-long storyline between Hogan and Savage. They had formed the Mega Powers. Hogan helped Savage win the world title at WrestleMania 4, and then over the course of a year, the build-up slowly developed with Elizabeth being in the middle. It was a love triangle storyline, you could say, and it was just a well-thought-out storyline that WWE had planned out a year in advance, and it just slowly built and it slowly escalated. Great storytelling here. Two of the all-time most memorable characters in the golden era of the WWE/WWF going at it. A must-see match. The Mega Powers exploding, an all-time classic. Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior from WrestleMania 6. Again, no technical masterpiece here, but it is the battle of the two superheroes. It's like Superman versus Batman. It was the two good guys going at it at WrestleMania. The crowd split down the middle. again, this was a first of its kind in the modern era of the WWF, where you had good guy versus good guy. You almost never saw that. It was usually good guy versus bad guy. But here it was the two fan favorites, the two biggest stars in the company, going at it in the main event at WrestleMania. Some people were on the Hogan bandwagon, some were behind the Warrior, but it made for an incredible atmosphere, and it was at the time seen as a passing of the torch, Hogan putting over Warrior. Of course, we knew better, but it was a very emotional moment, and even Jesse Ventura, who had been Hogan's arch enemy on commentary for all those years, even Ventura put over Hogan at the end. It was quite the performance from everybody involved. WrestleMania 7, Ultimate Warrior versus Randy Savage, career-ending match. Of course, it wasn't the end of Randy Savage's career, but again, it was the star power that really carried this match, and it was technically fairly good. It was probably the Ultimate Warrior's best match in his entire career. And you could give the praise to Randy Savage, but it does take two to tango. Very entertaining match, but my personal favorite moment, besides Randy Savage hitting something like 5 elbow drops and not being able to put away the Warrior, was after the match when Sensational Sherry, Randy's manager, turned against him, and that led to Elizabeth making the save and the reunion of Randy Savage and Elizabeth after 2 years of being apart following the Mega Powers exploding. This was one of the most emotional moments in wrestling history. Maybe the best moment that was 100% part of the story. We've seen a lot of storylines over the years that were based on real life, but this was just the reunion of Randy Savage and Elizabeth. They were already married in real life, but this was the storyline reunion. One of the best feel-good moments in WWF history, in my opinion. From 1992's WrestleMania 8, we have Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental title. Another great IC title match at WrestleMania. This was a real passing of the torch. Roddy Piper was one of the biggest stars of the 1980s, but he was doing other things. He was going to Hollywood, making movies, and he put over Bret Hart here, and this was just the beginning of Bret Hart's rise to the top in WWE. Roddy Piper almost never did jobs, so when he put over somebody, it was something special. I like the moment with the ring bell, with Piper teasing that he might cheat to win, but then decided not to. Unfortunately for him, that was his downfall, and Bret Hart was able to score the victory. Just a really fun match. Love the characters, and it's one of the best WrestleMania matches, in my opinion, when you look at all the different aspects and all the criteria. This is one of the top ones for me, definitely. From WrestleMania 10, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, brother versus brother. This was the opening match of the WrestleMania 10 pay-per-view, and up until WrestleMania 30, this was probably the best opening match in WrestleMania history, and some might feel it was even better than the WrestleMania 30 Triple H versus Daniel Bryan match. This was just an awesome match. I love the storyline with Owen Hart defeating his brother clean at WrestleMania, and then later the same night, Bret Hart defeats Yokozuna to win the WWE title. Everyone's celebrating with Bret. And even though he beat Bret, Owen is still in the shadow. This was a really well done storyline, and the match itself was great. I mean, Bret and Owen, brothers, I mean, it was just natural for them to have a great match, and really entertaining one to kick off this WrestleMania. Also from WrestleMania 10, Shawn Michaels versus the Bad Guy, Razor Ramon ladder match. It was Razor Ramon, the IC champion, against the man who claimed he was still the IC champion because he was never beaten for the title. He was stripped of the title. This was an excellent match, and it was a match that was really a trailblazer in terms of doing the high spots, doing the big bumps off the ladder. This was the first time we saw something like this at WrestleMania, and really the first show-stealing performance from Shawn Michaels, this is where he became Mr. WrestleMania. This is when the entire wrestling world took notice at Shawn Michaels, and they saw this guy as a future main eventer in WWE. This was a moment that really made his career, WrestleMania 10 in the ladder match. And Razor had a great performance too. A lot of people just think of Shawn Michaels, but Razor had his moments as well. Just a match that really lived up to the hype and was one of the best and set the standard for future matches. From WrestleMania 12 in Anaheim, California, this was Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, the Iron Man match. This was a period when WWF, WWE now, they were struggling in the ratings war against WCW. WCW had Hogan and Savage and all the 80s stars. So WWE wanted to prove something, that the new generation, this was where the athleticism was, and they had these two guys go out there and wrestle not just an hour, but it went into overtime with neither guy picking up a fall in that 1 hour period. And this was a good storyline because it gave Bret Hart an excuse that he thought it was just going to be an hour and that would be it. But Gorilla Monsoon insisted on a winner. Shawn Michaels was able to hit the sweet chin music and became the new champion. I love the celebration here from Shawn Michaels, realizing the boyhood dream. They spent a lot of time building up this match with video packages and playing up on Shawn Michaels finally reaching the top of the mountain in WWE. Love the storyline. I'm a bit critical of this match because I felt like for most of it, it was somewhat boring, but still, in terms of historical significance, it is one of the most memorable matches in WWE history. And of course, HBK's first run as the world champion began with this victory. WrestleMania 13, Steve Austin versus Bret Hart submission match. This is my all-time favorite WrestleMania match. This is my all-time favorite WWE match, period. This was the match that I feel really made Steve Austin's career. Steve Austin was a rising star, but this is the match that got people behind him, and it made Austin's career as far as I'm concerned. They pulled a flawless double turn. Bret Hart was the babyface going into the match. Steve Austin was the heel, but when it was over, the roles were reversed, and it was just done brilliantly. Bret Hart, he beat Austin to a bloody pulp, and then he put Austin in the sharpshooter. Austin refused to submit. He would not give up. He was bleeding profusely. Again, one of the most iconic moments besides Hogan and Andre in the body slam was Steve Austin in the sharpshooter just bleeding buckets. Just an unbelievably intense moment, and Steve Austin passed out from the pain, and it gave him credibility. He called himself the toughest SOB in the WWF. This was the moment that proved it to everybody and made his character be able to back up his claims. Then after the match, Bret Hart, all it took was one kick when Austin was down. The match was over. Bret Hart kicks him, and just like that, the crowd's booing Bret Hart, and the double turn was done. Steve Austin got to his feet. He refused to be carried out with any help. He walked out on his own, and that made Steve Austin the ultimate babyface. Greatest match in wrestling history. This match, I feel, is what set the tone for the Attitude Era and developed Steve Austin's character and defined Austin's character. And because of that, the WWF was able to see new levels of popularity and become the juggernaut that it is today. A lot of it due to this match here in 1997. WrestleMania 2000, aka WrestleMania 16, the Triangle Ladder match. This was before it was officially known as TLC. Edge and Christian versus the Dudleyz versus the Hardys. This was the first of their trilogy. And this was the match, in my opinion, that stole the show at this WrestleMania. Months earlier, Edge and Christian and the Hardys had a great ladder match, but this was the match that really put all three teams on the map, not just the Hardys and Edge and Christian, but the Dudleyz as well. And It was unbelievable. It was just a spectacle. That's the best way to describe it. Jeff Hardy doing that swanton bomb off the top of the ladder is one of those WrestleMania iconic moments, and just a really fun, exciting match. They took what Razor and Shawn Michaels did in '94 and just took it to a whole new level in terms of the risks and just the intensity. These guys were all unbelievable, and they really made tag team wrestling the thing in WWE. They put tag team wrestling on the map at this point with this match. The following year, WrestleMania 17 in Houston, Texas, we had the TLC match, which was TLC 2, which was the third match in the trilogy. Of course, the second match was at SummerSlam 2000. Another great match, by the way. This one was just as crazy as the first two. And of course, the big moment with Edge doing the spear to Jeff Hardy. Hardy was hanging on to the belts. That was another iconic moment in WrestleMania history, and just an unbelievable performance by everybody involved. So you got to check out these Edge and Christian, Dudleyz, and Hardy Boys TLC matches, and of course WrestleMania 2000. All three matches, the entire trilogy, is something you should be watching if you haven't already. Also from WrestleMania 17, Steve Austin versus The Rock for the WWE title. I'm not a fan of the finish. I'm not a fan of Steve Austin turning heel at the end. I think that that was a mistake, and even Steve Austin himself admitted it and said that if he could have done it over, he would have stunned Vince right there. But the match itself was excellent. It was really the peak of the Attitude Era. Steve Austin and The Rock doing battle, WrestleMania, 70,000 people, Houston, Texas. It doesn't get any bigger than that. So the match itself, this match was back and forth. You had each guy using the other guy's finishing move. The atmosphere was so intense, as Gorilla Monsoon would say, you could cut it with a knife. The only negative for me, of course, was the heel turn, but it was the exclamation point of arguably the greatest WrestleMania in WWE history, and no doubt one of the most memorable matches, whether you like the finish or not. From WrestleMania 18, The Undertaker versus Ric Flair. For me, this was the first Undertaker WrestleMania classic. Ric Flair, of course, had made his comeback just a few months earlier, and Ric Flair had something to prove, that he could still perform at the big stage and be one of the top guys, and this match was all about the star power. Ric Flair, Undertaker. I love the storyline leading up to the match. You had blood in this match. You had Arn Anderson coming in and hitting Undertaker with the spine buster. Lots of cool moments, and of course, this was Undertaker's 10th victory, so Undertaker made sure to raise his hands up, and I believe this was the first time that Undertaker acknowledged the streak at WrestleMania, and this is where the streak really became something that was a big part of The Undertaker's legacy at this WrestleMania. Also from WrestleMania 18, Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, Icon versus Icon. It's all about the star power here. This match was no technical masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. However, it was one of the most entertaining. WWE probably did not expect Hogan to get as big of a reaction as he did. When he came out there, it was like 1985 all over again. The fans were just firmly behind Hogan. They were booing The Rock, and it was just an unbelievable spectacle to watch. Hulk Hogan could basically just stand there and the crowd was going crazy. Hogan was doing back rakes on The Rock and the crowd was popping like it was the greatest thing they ever saw. This was the rebirth of Hulkamania. After years of being in WCW and in the NWO, this was Hulk Hogan's big comeback moment. And even though he was putting over The Rock, which is something he should be doing, the match was about Hogan. It was about the rebirth of Hulkamania, and definitely one of Hogan's biggest moments in his entire career. And From WrestleMania 19, Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho. Shawn Michaels, only about 6-7 months earlier, had made his WWE comeback after being gone for 4 years. This was a big moment for Shawn Michaels to come back to WrestleMania and have a great performance, and that he did. He could not have asked for a better match, I think, at WrestleMania. Him and Jericho really stole the show, and it was the beginning of a great feud between these two that would last for many years on and off. Michaels and Jericho, they just had that chemistry in the ring. They worked really well together, and this one is another one of Shawn Michaels' all-time classics. You know, one of the reasons he became Mr. WrestleMania. Also from WrestleMania 19, The Rock versus Steve Austin. This was the third match of their WrestleMania trilogy. I did mention WrestleMania 17. I like this match better because there's no Austin heel turn. And this was a significant match, not just because of the fact that it was the third match of their trilogy. It was the first time that Steve Austin put over The Rock at WrestleMania. And as it turned out, it was Austin's final match, period. This was the end of Steve Austin's run. So it is bittersweet to watch it, knowing it's Austin's last performance, but what a way to go out. And against Hollywood Rock. Hollywood Rock was just unbelievably entertaining. He came out there, he did the Rock concert, and Steve Austin just got in his face. This was such a fun match to watch. The Rock doing all of his different shtick and routine, wearing Austin's vest, and just being extremely entertaining and funny. I love this match. My personal favorite of the Austin Rock trilogy. And also from WrestleMania 19, my personal favorite WrestleMania, by the way, Hulk Hogan versus Vince McMahon. Again, it's not one of those matches that is known for being a technical masterpiece, but it is a match that was extremely significant in a sense that it was a match that was something like 15, 20 years in the making, going back to 1984, so almost 20 years. Hulk Hogan and the relationship with Vince McMahon had its ups and downs, and this match was all about settling a score that had been boiling for almost 20 years at that point. And of course, there was a special surprise appearance by Roddy Piper, Hulk Hogan's arch rival from the first WrestleMania, showing up and attacking Hogan, which added to the memorable aspect of this match. Just when you have these two icons going at it, it's just magic. And I think the match went about as well as you could possibly ask from these two. But again, it's the star power that really carries it through. From WrestleMania 20, Chris Benoit versus Triple H versus Shawn Michaels for the World Heavyweight Championship. Unfortunately, because of what happened with Chris Benoit, WrestleMania 20 and specifically this match are forgotten about in history, but you cannot deny the quality of this match. Technically speaking, it's one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. And what a moment at the end. Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero embracing each other, holding up their respective championships. Just the culmination of their hard work, grinding on the indies, in WCW, in Japan, ECW, and finally making it to WWE and making it to WrestleMania and ending the show as champions. One of the best moments in WrestleMania history. Unfortunately, everything that happened with Benoit tarnished the legacy of this match, but it's still one of the all-time great WrestleMania matches. So if you're able to overlook what happened with Benoit, then I definitely recommend this one if you haven't seen it. It's just an instant classic. From WrestleMania 21, Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle. I was there live for this WrestleMania, and this, in my opinion, is the greatest wrestling match I have ever seen in person. Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels, just two wrestling geniuses. Shawn Michaels, of course, Mr. WrestleMania, and Kurt Angle, he's a wrestling machine. The two of these guys put on an absolute clinic. and it's one of those matches where if you're learning how to be a wrestler, this is a match you should study and watch over and over again. See what these guys are doing and why it worked. I mean, they were just unbelievable with their performances, and this match is just as close to flawless as you could ask for. Just an excellent match. Love the build-up, by the way, especially Kurt Angle and Sherry coming out and doing the Sexy Kurt song, one of Kurt's funniest moments. And this match, it was serious and it was straight to the point, and I loved it. Excellent, excellent WrestleMania match. From WrestleMania 22, we have Mick Foley, hard to see him in the fire, versus Edge. This was an intense match, an intense feud, and this was something of a comeback for Mick Foley. Mick Foley was at WrestleMania 20, but the match did not really light the world on fire, so to speak. So Mick Foley wanted to come back and have a great WrestleMania match, and him and Edge, they delivered. They had this great, violent, intense match that culminated with the big spot, Edge spearing Mick Foley through the flaming table. And this is one of the most memorable spots in WrestleMania history, and a big comeback for Mick Foley. Maybe his most memorable WrestleMania moment. That is certainly arguable, but this match was definitely one of the all-time greats. From WrestleMania 23, Batista versus The Undertaker. Undertaker's streak was really starting to become something significant at this point. Batista was perhaps the biggest challenge that Undertaker had up to this moment. And the two of these guys, they stole the show. And when it was over, they allegedly went backstage and told everybody else to follow that. I mean, those two guys went out there and just had an incredible match, back and forth, two super heavyweights clashing, and again, it was like the irresistible force meeting the immovable object, and Batista gave Undertaker a run for his money, that's for sure. Just great match between these two, and it lived up to the expectations and then some. Also from WrestleMania 23, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels. Got to give Shawn Michaels credit. Mr. WrestleMania comes through again, and this time Shawn Michaels is helping put over the new guy. Of course, John Cena at the time was the new face of the company. A lot of fans were not happy about it, but John Cena was the guy WWE was going with, and Shawn Michaels, he made John Cena look like $1 million in this match, and he put over John Cena, but it was back and forth again. It was a great WrestleMania clash between two of the biggest stars in WWE history. You had the star power, you had the in-ring quality. It was just a really fun, exciting match to watch, and what a way to end WrestleMania. This match and Batista and Undertaker helped make this WrestleMania one of the greats. From WrestleMania 24, Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair. This was a match where Ric Flair's career was on the line, and as it turns out, it would be Ric Flair's final match in WWE. Very emotional match. Technically, not one of the greats. I think it could have been better from a technical aspect, but the emotion, the raw emotion in this match is really what carries it and what you remember. Shawn Michaels saying, "I'm sorry, I love you," before delivering the super kick, and then immediately, once the 3 count is done, Shawn Michaels just turns Flair over and embraces him and is crying. Everybody in the arena is crying. Flair is crying. Stadium, I should say, not arena. Flair having his big send-off. I mean, it is one of the most emotional moments, maybe the most emotional moment in WrestleMania history, to see the end of Ric Flair's run in WWE and his WWE retirement. Also from WrestleMania 24, we have Edge versus The Undertaker. Not my favorite Undertaker match, but I know it's very popular with most WWE fans, and I feel it's still delivered as a quality WrestleMania main event. I think my favorite moment of this match is Charles Robinson running down to the ring as fast as possible to try and make the 3 count. That was great. Edge and Undertaker, they had that chemistry, and Undertaker was arguably at his peak, even though he had been in WWE for 18 years at this point. Undertaker in 2007, 2008, he was just physically at his peak, and he was having just one great match after another, whether it was against Shawn Michaels or Batista or Edge. Undertaker was delivering, in Edge's Edge. The two of these guys just had the chemistry working together, and this was another star-studded main event to close WrestleMania 24. Next up, we have Undertaker, again, versus Shawn Michaels, again. So you have two icons of WrestleMania. What do? Naturally, you put them together, and that's what we got here at WrestleMania 25. This was arguably the best match these two guys ever had. Some would argue Hell in a Cell, but this match really stole the show at the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania, WrestleMania 25. Other than this match, it was a fairly lackluster WrestleMania. When these guys went out there, they just went to school. They took everybody to school. And this was one of my all-time favorite matches. No real gimmicks or anything, just a straight-up match with the streak on the line. I love the entrances. Undertaker coming up from hell, Shawn Michaels coming down from heaven. I love the entrances, the black and the white contrast, and they didn't need any weapons or any gimmicks. They just had a straight-up great match. And again, it's one of those matches where if you're trying to become a wrestler and you're studying matches, this is one you have to check out, see what these guys are doing. They just had the crowd in the palms of their hands. Brilliant, brilliant stuff from these guys. And then the following year, WrestleMania 26, it was streak versus career. Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker. I do feel 25 was a better match overall, but 26 did have the novelty of having HBK's career on the line, and as it turned out, it was HBK's final match and his farewell from WrestleMania and WWE as an in-ring performer. Another emotional moment in WWE history to see Shawn go out. I love the defiance in this match. Shawn Michaels refusing to stay down. Undertaker's frustrated, and then he finally puts away Shawn Michaels with the jumping tombstone. Love the finish for this match and just love the whole thing. Another iconic moment in WrestleMania history. From WrestleMania 27, Undertaker versus Triple H. This was the second of 3 Undertaker versus Triple H matches. In my opinion, this is the best one from a technical standpoint. Just a great fight between two big stars, and they really did not need any kind of build for this match. They came out on Monday Night Raw and just had a stare down. No words were exchanged. They just stared at each other. You had the WrestleMania sign in the background, and that's all they needed. This was a clinic. These guys had a great match. I love the chair shot to the head, even though they got fined for it. It was still something that we hadn't seen much at that point because of the chair shot ban to the head. Still, very memorable match, and way better than I was expecting going in. I wasn't sure what to make of that match, but it turned out to be the saving grace of this WrestleMania, much like Michaels and Undertaker 2 years earlier. I feel this was the match that really defined this WrestleMania in a positive way. And then we had WrestleMania 28, which was the Hell in a Cell match, Undertaker versus Triple H, with Shawn Michaels as the referee. I always thought this match was a little overrated because I felt like they were doing Hell in a Cell and they really didn't utilize the cell like you think they should have, considering the history with these guys. It felt like the cell wasn't even relevant in the match. But nonetheless, it was a significant match in history. These 3 guys had so many matches against each other in various combinations, and this was truly the end of the era for these 3 guys. And I love the ending. I love this final moment with the 3 of them on the stage. Just a really cool visual. Another one of those iconic WrestleMania moments. So I like this match for the fact that it had that moment. That's what really made it for me personally. Also from WrestleMania 28, The Rock versus John Cena, the once-in-a-lifetime match. Of course, it was not once in a lifetime. They did have a follow-up at WrestleMania 29. This one I like because it was the first one, and it was a year in the making. They spent a year building this up. John Cena coming out, doing the basic thugonomics, ripping into The Rock, the Fruity Pebbles, all these back and forth jabs at each other. I love the build up for this match. And again, it's like Hogan and The Rock, Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. It was all about the star power here. And I really enjoyed this match. Definitely my favorite of the two. And it's one of those matches that is all about the star power in one era versus the other era. From WrestleMania 29, CM Punk versus Undertaker. This was another one of those matches that was a saving grace for the entire WrestleMania. Undertaker and CM Punk had a great match. CM Punk was a credible threat to the Undertaker's streak. You had Paul Heyman there with CM Punk. I love the angle they did, even though it was controversial, with CM Punk and Paul Bearer's urn. Undertaker beating Punk in the end, though, made up for that. And Undertaker, his streak continued. It was almost over, but it was a very close match here between these two, and just technically great. You had everything in this match. Great wrestling, great characters, great storyline development. From WrestleMania 30, Daniel Bryan versus Triple H. WrestleMania 30 was all about Daniel Bryan and his rise to the top, his unlikely rise to the top, because he wasn't one of those guys that people felt WWE was going to push to the top, because he's not the tall 6'5" plus 300-pound guy. Daniel Bryan having to go through Triple H just to qualify for the main event. And this, along with Bret Hart and Owen Hart, both of these matches have to be the two greatest opening matches in WrestleMania history. And the whole story arc of Daniel Bryan having to beat Triple H first and then beat Batista and Randy Orton to win the title was one of the all-time memorable WrestleMania storylines. And of course, this leads me to the main event of this WrestleMania, which was Daniel Bryan versus Batista versus Randy Orton. And the odds, again, stacked against Daniel Bryan. Arguably the greatest one-night storyline in WrestleMania history, right up there with 10 from start to finish. Daniel Bryan first overcoming Triple H and then winning this triple threat to become the undisputed world champion. Just one of the best feel-good moments for every Daniel Bryan fan out there, to see the underdog finally prevail after years of being held back and having start and stop pushes and being fired at one point. This was just one of those moments where you were just thrilled to see this guy finally reach the top and truly overcome all the odds in an organic way and not in a forced way. And finally, the last match on my top 34 list from WrestleMania 31, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. This was surprisingly a really good match. The build-up was not ideal. I mean, they had a tug of war for the title, for crying out loud. But the match itself was really good, and the crowd was invested in it. I was at this WrestleMania, and they were just beating the crap out of each other. Brock Lesnar was busted open, and he took Roman Reigns to Suplex City. I think this was the first time he said Suplex City, bitch. But then the big story, the really big story, was Seth Rollins coming out and cashing in his Money in the Bank contract in this match. First time ever the briefcase holder was cashing in at WrestleMania in the main event. And what a moment. The crowd just went completely unglued. They were so happy that Seth Rollins cashed in Money in the Bank and won the WWE title. Great way to end WrestleMania and really define Seth Rollins' career in WWE. So this one was a lot of fun, not just because of the quality of Reigns versus Lesnar, but also the involvement of Seth Rollins at the end. Very memorable, historic moment with the Money in the Bank cash-in. So that's it for my top 34 WrestleMania matches in history video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like this video, subscribe, and tell a friend about this video. Stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest news and rumors.